A Penn State senior goes missing after a Halloween party. She was last seen by her friends who dropped her off at her apartment at 4 a.m. on November 1st, 2001. She has not been seen again. This is the case of Hyun Jong. Hyun Jong often went by the nickname Cindy, so throughout the rest of this video I will be calling her Cindy. She was known to her friends more as Cindy Song rather than Hyun Jong. She was born and raised for most of her early life in South Korea. However, in 1995, she did move to the States. She was living in Springfield, Virginia with her aunt and uncle. And when she went off to college, she went to Penn State University. It was the night of Halloween, so it was October 31st of 2001, and Cindy had gone with some friends to a Halloween party late that night. It was early in the morning on November 1st when her friends decided that they were ready to leave the party. From reports that I've seen, their friends said that they went back to one of their apartments and they played some games for a little bit. So it was around 4 a.m. by the time that they finally drove Cindy back to her own apartment and dropped her off. However, the friends did not stay to make sure that she got inside of her apartment after dropping her off. They simply left. It was at this point that Cindy was never seen again. Now, I did want to state that, according to friends, they had been drinking that night, as is pretty typical for a college senior going out to parties on a Halloween night. So that definitely was something that happened that night, but as far as we know, it didn't play any role in what has happened to Cindy. So it wasn't until 3 days later, on November 4th, by the time that friends still hadn't heard from her, that Cindy was reported missing. So police went to her apartment to investigate, and they did find evidence that Cindy had gone into her apartment that night after being dropped off following the Halloween party. Her backpack was in there, which she had had with her from earlier in the day. There was also her cell phone, which her friends have stated that she would never leave her apartment without. And there were also the fake eyelashes that she had been wearing as a part of her costume. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up a picture over here real quick of Cindy on the night of Halloween 2001. She was dressed up as a bunny. She had on her bunny ears, she was wearing a pink tank top, and she had fake eyelashes on, and like I said, those fake eyelashes were found in the apartment, which proves that Cindy did get into her apartment the night that she was dropped off. The only things that had been missing from her apartment were her purse and her keys. Cindy had made no calls after having been dropped off at her apartment, according to phone records. There was also no travel plans that anybody knew of that she had. There were no indications that Cindy had any reason to have specifically gone anywhere for any sort of extended period of time. There was also no activity on any of her credit cards. There has been no activity whatsoever from any of her accounts since the day that she went missing. It was about a month before Cindy disappeared that she had broken up with a boyfriend. Her family had considered briefly that this could be related to her disappearance. They thought that maybe she wasn't handling it well and that maybe it had led her to become depressed and maybe to have gone and either committed suicide or to have run away or something. However, her friends debated this. They said that Cindy was not depressed, that she had broken up with her boyfriend, but that she was handling it very, very well, and they didn't see any signs of her having been really distressed at all over the fact that her and her boyfriend had broken up. So some people believe that in this case, Cindy had been abducted from her apartment, stating that either somebody may have been inside her apartment waiting for her to return, or that they had followed her in her apartment as she came in and maybe she hadn't noticed them. However, there's just no evidence at all of anybody having been in her apartment other than her. And a lot of other people believe that Cindy may have left her apartment again that night after dropping off some of her belongings, and she may have been abducted en route to a 24-hour market. Her friend said that she often did go to this 24-hour market, that it wasn't unusual for her to go extremely late or extremely early, and it would make sense that she had gone there if there had been anything that she thought she needed. The only thing that seems strange about this was that she didn't have her phone on her, which her friends stated she would not leave without. So there is a chance that she did leave her apartment to go to this 24-hour market, but it's also a little bit fuzzy on whether or not that's a likely prospect, seeing as she did leave her phone at home. Some people have speculated that she may have just left her phone at home so that it could charge or something, or because it was dead already and she just didn't want to bother taking it if it was dead. So unfortunately, we don't know why her phone was still in her apartment. We don't know if she did leave her apartment voluntarily and then was abducted. We really don't have any idea as to what has happened to her. We have no clue if she was taken from her apartment or afterwards. So according to Song's diary, which police did find in her apartment, she had experimented with both marijuana and ecstasy with some of her friends. However, they were unable to find any sort of evidence that suggested that any type of drugs had been used on the night that they were out for the Halloween party. There was no evidence that drugs were at all related to her disappearance in any sort of way, so that was quickly ruled out as having been related at all. It wasn't very long into the investigation that an eyewitness called with a tip. They said that they had seen Cindy in a car in the Chinatown district in Philadelphia. They said that they saw Cindy calling out for help from the car, and when the person tried to approach the car, a man that was sitting in the driver's seat told her to leave, and she did. So police quickly jumped onto this lead. They went to Philadelphia. They tried to find the man. They were searching for him for a really long time based on information that this woman had given them. However, they did say later on that the story that this woman had given them changed multiple times. They were completely unable to verify that any of this happened, and she wasn't able to keep her story straight. So eventually they just had to kind of drop that lead because it didn't seem to be genuine, and they weren't able to find a man who had been seen with a woman matching Cindy's description. Now, at one point, there were multiple law enforcement officials from a few different jurisdictions within Michigan and Wisconsin, and they were investigating the possibility that Cindy's case could be related to 4 cases that all kind of happened around Halloween, the year after Cindy went missing. These were the cases of Joshua Guymond, Erica Dahlquist, Chris Jenkins, and Michael Knoll. These people all went missing around the time of Halloween in 2002. There were investigations as to whether those cases were related. There were investigations as to whether they were related to Cindy's case, because these people were also college students who went missing around Halloween after having attended Halloween-themed parties. So there was an investigation into this, but there was absolutely no evidence to suggest that all of these cases were related. I do believe that one of those 4 cases was solved, and I believe that there is a strong suspect in 2 of the other cases, and there's just nothing to go on one of those other cases. However, I was not able to go too far into depth into researching those cases because I really did need to focus on Cindy's case, and there really isn't any sort of evidence to suggest that they are all connected. So right now, the most likely suspect in Cindy's case is a man by the name of Hugo Marcus Solinsky. Solinsky is a bank robber. He is an armed bank robber. He has committed a long crime. He has a very, very long list of charges against him throughout the years. He has been in and out of court for a very long time at this point. It wasn't too terribly long after Cindy's disappearance that there were multiple bodies found on the property of Solinsky. He had killed multiple people, and there were burned bodies that had been buried in his yard. So police tried to connect Cindy to this case because they had an informant by the name of Paul Weekly, and he had given information on, I believe, 5 different cases that they were able to prove this information was factual on, related to Solinsky having committed crimes. I believe all 5 of those instances were murders and people that were found buried in his yard. This person gave information saying that Solinsky had admitted to him at one point that he and a fellow cohort by the name of Kurkowski had kidnapped Cindy, and that they had kept her in a walk-in safe inside his home until she died. This was something that they haven't been able to prove yet. None of the bodies found in Solinsky's yard belonged to Song. One of the bodies, however, did belong to Kurkowski, and Solinsky has said that he killed Kurkowski after Kurkowski had saved the bunny ears that Cindy had been wearing as a part of her costume the night that she went missing, which is, I believe, sort of a strange fact to have. I'm not sure how widely publicized the fact that Cindy was dressed as a bunny was. I would imagine that it was pretty well publicized because she was a missing person, and none of her costume pieces other than her fake eyelashes had been found in her apartment, so it was assumed that she was still wearing her costume when she had gone back out that night and when she went missing. So it's definitely likely that somehow Solinsky had heard about this case before and he just decided to jump on the bandwagon and say that yes, he murdered her and that he murdered Kurkowski because Kurkowski helped him murder her and he had kept her bunny ears as a souvenir. So I do feel that it kind of lends possibly a little more to him saying that he did commit this and that he committed it with Kurkowski, but at the same time, this is information that I believe was available to the public, that she was in a bunny costume, that she had bunny ears as a part of that costume, so it really also could mean nothing. According to Weekly, who was the informant, Solinsky had said that he had buried Cindy's body, but that he hadn't buried it in his yard, that he had just buried it somewhere in Luzerne County. At this point, I'm going to pull up some maps for you guys so that you can kind of see where Cindy had been at the party, where her apartment was in relation to that, and the area where the bodies in Solinsky's property were found, and the basic area of that county where he claimed to have buried Cindy's body.
So as you can see here, this is a map of the Penn State University area. This blue dot over here marks the Players nightclub where Cindy and her friends were at the Halloween party, and the red dot over here marks the approximate location of Cindy's apartment. Unfortunately, it appears that those apartments are no longer in this area. They have been torn down and replaced by something else, but this right here is all of Clinton Avenue, which is what her apartment building was on. So that's not a whole lot of space right there anyhow, so this is just an approximation of where her apartments would have been. They would have been from about here to here, anywhere on this road. So this is approximately how close she was to Players nightclub. Looking at directions on Google Maps, I found that it's only about a 4-minute drive away, so she was pretty close to the area where they had been partying earlier that morning. We've zoomed in a little bit closer here. We can see once again the red dot, which is the approximate location of Cindy Song's apartment. Now, if she were to take just a short walk down here and over this way, she would have reached the 24-hour market. And this is, again, an approximate location of where that market is. This is an area with a number of stores in it, so this just shows you the general space that that market would have been in. So it wouldn't have been very far for her to be able to get from this red dot to this green dot. And apparently this was a trip that she would typically make at any time of the day. She wouldn't have been worried about making such a trip late at night, as her friends had stated that she had gone out to this 24-hour market multiple times very late in the night before. According to Google Maps, a walk of this distance would have only taken approximately 6 minutes to complete, so it wasn't very far for her to walk at all. So even though Cindy Song had left her phone in her apartment that night when she left, I do believe there's a chance that she could have just simply been making this usual trip of hers over to the 24-hour market. And I feel that even though she did leave her phone, she could have done that on accident, or she could have left it because it may have been dead and she knew that even if she had taken it with her, it wouldn't have been of any use to her. So I do feel that there is a high possibility that Cindy left her apartment of her own free will to possibly make this short trip that she was used to making over to this 24-hour market. This right here is a satellite view of Solinsky's property where there were approximately 12 bodies that had been burned and buried in his yard. Now, if we back out of this a little bit here, give me just 1 second. We're going to switch on over to the regular map mode. So that location was approximately up here at this area, and this is Luzerne County, so in this general area here. So essentially, what happened is that Solinsky never once said that Song's body had been buried on his property. He said that he had buried her in some place in Luzerne County. He had never given anything more specific than that from what I've been able to find. So he never said that she was on his property. It is possible that if Solinsky was involved in this, that her body could be anywhere within this county area.
So when Cindy had gone missing, her parents flew in from South Korea and they ended up cleaning out her apartment, which unfortunately destroyed any other possible evidence that the police may have been able to find over time. So that definitely destroyed a possible crime scene, but as the police have said in multiple interviews, there really wasn't a crime scene per se, because there had been no evidence of a break-in or anything related to that in Cindy's apartment. But it definitely did come as a blow that they had flown all the way out there and that they had cleaned out the entire apartment, because if there was any reason that they might have had in the future to go back and look through things, now it would be too late because any possible evidence would be contaminated. So there was a lot of criticism of the law enforcement in this case. The Black Caucus and the Korean Undergraduate Students Association on the Penn State campus both criticized the police department a lot on this case. They said that they weren't doing a lot, that there hadn't been a whole lot of progress, that they were really disappointed in the way things were being done. They also criticized the university itself a lot, saying that the university should be responsible for ensuring that if a student goes missing, that that student can be found. Of course, I don't really see how it's the university's responsibility to take care of that. Obviously, you know, the university didn't do something to her. So, I mean, I understand their frustration, and I think that them continuing to talk about it definitely kept the case alive for the first couple of years afterward. But unfortunately, I feel that a lot of the criticism was maybe a little unneeded. I wasn't able to really get a whole lot of evidence of the fact that law enforcement really wasn't doing anything. I think that the reason they weren't able to get anywhere is because, like they had said, they didn't really have a crime scene. Nothing had really occurred in the apartment. They couldn't find evidence of anyone else having been in there, and they didn't have any idea where she may have gone if she had left her apartment voluntarily, and where she could have been abducted from if that had been the case. So unfortunately, there just wasn't really a lot to go on at all from the very beginning, and I feel that that probably really stunted the progress of this case, and I think that it might be just a little bit harsh to judge law enforcement too terribly much for this one. I feel that they did what they could at the beginning, and then I feel like because they had so little, they ended up kind of, you know, losing steam pretty early on, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, they really didn't have anything to go off of, so all they were relying on is tips, and tips dried out pretty quickly. The university did, however, offer an apartment in student housing as well as internet access for Cindy's mother for while she was there trying to find her daughter. She did not take them up on this from what I could find, but they did offer it for her, so I do feel that while the university wouldn't have been able to do a whole lot, they at least were trying to do something for her family so that they could, you know, be there and not have to try to pay rent for a place to try to stay there to keep searching for their daughter. So I think that was definitely a good thing for them to do on their end. Something that people have mentioned a lot in this case is, what about security camera footage? If Cindy left her apartment voluntarily to go to a store, then there was probably a security camera somewhere. If not at that store, then at stores along the way that might be watching, you know, the sidewalk outside the stores and whatnot. So people have been talking about how Cindy went to a 24-hour market. That's the most likely place that she went because it wasn't unusual for her to go there, especially really late at night. So if she went there, this market does have security cameras. Unfortunately, what I have seen is that by the time police had gotten there to see any footage, the footage would have already been recorded over anyways, because it doesn't save all the footage. It records for however long, and then eventually, you know, it has to record over that. It's not a continuous recording. So unfortunately, there is no security camera evidence of where Cindy may have gone that night. One thing that I definitely do criticize about this case is that they brought in a psychic. Her name is Carla Barron, and I feel like I have a lot to say about psychics being involved in cases like this, but I feel like that's a separate video that I'll probably do in the future, all about psychics being involved in cases like this, so I'm not going to go into that too much in this video. But essentially, from what I have found, she has said pretty basic things, something that wouldn't be too difficult for anybody to really assume. And in addition to that, I feel like some of what she has said only came out to the public after there was evidence of that. Personally, I don't believe in psychics. I don't believe that a psychic is going to solve this case. I find it a little bit strange. I find it a lot bit strange that they would bring in a psychic for something like this, and it's brought a whole lot of paranormal attention to the case, but I really don't think that she's really added anything important. yeah, that's just my personal view on it. She definitely hasn't cracked the case. There is that. And I have gone through her personal website and I've seen some of the things that she's been saying about the case, or well, not that she's been saying, but that she said about the case back when she was pulled onto it to help work on it. So I've looked through that. I don't see anything significant that she's really brought to the table, but the lead detective on the case, the only person who had been working on the case at that point, was a Detective Sprinkle. So he is the one who kind of brought on the psychic, and I personally don't think that that was the best idea, and I really don't see that she's brought anything of value to the table in this case. However, with that being said, I'm not the detective on this case. I don't have all the information that she's given. I don't know what all she said or claims to have seen. So maybe she's given them information that they haven't released that has been helpful, but as of what the public knows, there really isn't anything of value there. I would also like to state that this is the same psychic that claimed to know some things about the Elizabeth Smart case when Elizabeth was kidnapped. And I did just do a review of Elizabeth's book called My Story. I did that on Monday. It's part of a new series I'm doing called True Crime Book Reviews, and those are going to be every other Monday. So if you guys want to check out more about the Elizabeth Smart case, you should definitely start by watching that video and then getting that book and reading it, because it's definitely good. So you can hear more of my thoughts on that book in that previous video. So that is pretty much all the information that we have in this case. It seems that the strongest suspect is definitely Solinsky. However, there's no physical evidence whatsoever that ties him to her at all. There are no bunny ears that were found. There is no costume pieces other than that have been found. Her remains were not of the 12 people that were found on his property, and there's no physical evidence as to when and where Cindy was abducted from that night. So they're really, it's really unfortunate. There's just nothing to go on. And I feel that as much as I want this case to be solved, I think it's something that's going to be extremely hard for people to solve unless somebody knows something and they come forward. So I definitely want to urge you guys to think about this case. If you happen to know anything that might be related to it, any sort of information that could help, definitely call the number that I will put on screen right now. I will also put that information in the description box down below for you guys. Make sure that if you do have any information related to this case, anything that could help at all, that you guys give that number a call and you let them know about it. Personally, I do believe that Cindy probably left her apartment voluntarily, and I believe that either somebody came to her apartment that she knew and she left with them, or that she went to go to that 24-hour market, and I believe that after she had left her apartment, that's when she was taken. I don't have any feelings that this case was some sort of accident. I don't feel that there's any sort of like she was hit and somebody maybe had taken her body because they didn't want to get in trouble for that, you know, accident, and then they hid her body somewhere. I feel that she probably would have been hidden pretty close by. I feel that they probably would have found her. There were searches done of the area, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. It is possible that there could have been some sort of terrible accident and nobody intended to hurt her or kill her in any way. I don't think at all that she left of her own free will. I don't think that she ran off for any reason. There's no evidence that that's the case. There's no reason to believe that she would have wanted to. So I really do think that somebody did something to her. I do feel that she left her apartment of her own free will, and I do think that it was after she left her apartment that she was taken. So I just wish that there was more solid information to go off on this case, but there's just not. So like I said, if you guys have any information, please make sure that you give that to the authorities. It would be great if this case could be solved one day. I definitely hope that there will be a break in this case at some point. Unfortunately, there's a whole lot of shady business going on with Solinsky, especially with his trials, how he was acquitted of murder charges for 2 of the bodies that were found in his yard. There's a whole lot of strange stuff going on with Solinsky, and I think that I'm going to do a separate video on him too at some point, because it's very, very odd, and there seems to be possibly some sort of cover-up or some sort of like ridiculously botched investigation and trial involved in Solinsky. So I'm definitely going to dive into that more in a future episode, but as of right now, I think that he's the most likely suspect. But of course, there could be somebody else. So I just hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about this case. I hope you guys can help me get the word out there about her case. I feel like it definitely hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves. I feel that just one person having the right piece of information and just coming forward with it could help solve this case. So please help me get this case out there, guys, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on Friday for a new video, because I have decided that I will be posting 3 days a week on this channel from now on. So I will see you guys in 2 more days for a new video. Bye, everyone.